Damn it.
Welcome back. Come back here whenever you're tired.
Oh yeah, I forgot about it again. Huh. Just a free treasure chest, for no real reason. So, the black doors. May as well grind and maybe get an extra level before we do that. Oh yeah, stuff. Nectar 2. I guess that's good. The copper grimoire. I believe the grimoires we find on chests are fixed in terms of what they have. That's a lot of treasure. One-time use items, by the way. I like this song. It sounds very Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, it's using the same, like, string instrument. that Yugi's theme uses. The initial kicker is my favorite part. No build up, no nothing, just immediately to the back. Something we're definitely strong enough to handle now. Wrong place. Ooh, hell yeah.
Welcome back to the coverage of the Italian National Championship 2025 live from Bologna. We're now in round 6 and on Friday.
Come at me.
You guys, and we have briefly touched upon
All three of you.
meta breakdown for the event. Let's say Rising Mali standing at the top, but if there was a surprise.
You know, I actually want to listen to the full version of that.
And it's only fitting that now finally we're able to guys us to the 5-0 score, and it's actually
Okay, so I'm either an idiot or there's no way to... There's really no way to see the debuffs we have on enemies, which really fucking sucks. Hopefully at Your Odyssey Untold 2 we can see them.
About, you know, trying all of your opponent monsters, the Fire Kings.
It really sucks that all we have is the
I think so. And, I mean, I'm really curious to see this kind of
thingamabobbers.
I mean, we talked about this before. I mean, we were really looking forward to give you guys this specific matchup of Fire King, and also facing, you know, Mitsurugi pure version, which I'm very so, I mean, without no further ado, I would say that our players are ready, so let's jump. Fire King picture and Fire King on the roll. I've seen the Tinka, of course, how this deck plays out.
Here it is. Why is it fucking the other lore, the other guys that are related to the Drytron lore, or Sartex, as the thumbnail?
of course, against fire. Puts a lot of pressure, but let's see here how very close how that
And I want to be playing more Yu-Gi-Oh right now. I could go on ranked, but I'm still trying to cope on practice White Forest.
of these outfits are actually shut down. But there are quite a few monsters that collect. And that would be a and it's illegal to summon, you just cannot activate the effects.
I have its head on repeat. Let it play one more time.
Very versatile card, of course. You see the Skyburn, he keeps the Skyburn, and that's big. Very good one. Yeah. And gets rid of both of them. Gonna then activate the Phoenix and come back later on. And now there is the Garmonic. Graveyard. Yeah, there goes. Pop for advantage. Once you can pop, I guess healing back Arbaba, back enough. Solid stuff. Not only do you get this Carvada, you also set up the princess graveyard. So yeah, this looks amazing. Chain blocker, yes. The Armada obviously.
Welcome to the rooster. Very well. A quick rest, right? Of course. Well, be careful out there.
Hello? What you got for me? Thanks.
So now it's at
Thanks. Is that all you came for? Thanks for the business. Let me have a look. Welcome back, everyone. Item storage then? Very well. I'll look after these. Very well. I'll look after these. Very well. I'll look after these. Is there anything? Item storage then? Is this what you wanted? Here you are. Is this what you wanted? Here you are. Is this what you wanted? Here you are. Are you tired from your investigation? Who will carry this one?
What the?
Who will carry this one? Who will carry this one?
I'm not actually using any of these. The attack up's nice, but again, if we're maxed out, it might not be possible to get it any higher anyway. Let's get you Holy Gift and Severing Slash. Bruh.
It's synthesis you want?
Yeah, looks like that.
Will this do? It's done. Please, take
Tama. Enters battle phase and attack with cool.
Will this do? It's done. Please, take it.
Another effect, during the battle, you can special summon a priority monster from the deck. Onyx. Allows to get another sky bird. Well, I mean, still, I think the trying to navigate this, like maximum hand was still, combat draw lock the work further than people.
Feels bad, but yeah, I can get more attack up 7 someday, maybe, probably. That's a whole 15% more XP we're gonna be getting. Hooray.
Okay,
Will this do? It's done. Please, take it. Who will carry this one? Have a safe trip. Welcome back, everyone. I am at your service. Yes, at once. Is there anything else? Have a safe trip.
As you mentioned, quite time.
Welcome to the roost. Very well. Then allow me to show you to your room.
Now we can go for some.
Well, be careful out there.
Not even sure that we have that many targets left.
Oh,
another copy of battle phase, trying to crash the trigger back once more all this array of party monsters in the graveyard. But we have seen as mentioned that does as
The recording.
Villain.
Trespassers from the sealed lands, by what right dost thou desecrate our sacred ground? Thy presence here violates the ancient pact between our peoples. I have warned thee, but thou paid me no heed. Face then the guardian of our holy land. I really hate how most villains just let random monsters do the dirty work for them. There's like one guy, and unfortunately he's kind of literally the least interesting villain and it's from Nexus, who actually does decide to do his dirty work himself when it comes time for it. Big fish.
Hear me, Koloturongo. Smite these vile intruders.
Nice pronunciation. It actually approaches, holy shit, that's scary. Try to see if that's in a cycle, so we can time our ice wall properly. Oh, fire's the weakness. That makes things easy. with every 3 turns. Oh, that's right. Remembered I should be doing this way more efficiently. Like bind, that doesn't matter. Shit. I can do this better. So let's do it better. I could
Welcome
have
back.
won,
Come back here whenever you're tired.
but I want to do it better.
Villain. Hear me, Koloturongo. Smite these vile intruders.
That wasn't very useful. Really? Okay, I think it's just random when it decides to fucking use the ice attack. It's not worth trying to predict it. Bruh, 2 in a row. Bro, it's just spamming ice. I mean, it's his strongest move, obviously, why wouldn't it? But I'm dying. That's bad. Excuse me, what the fuck? Okay, sure. That was fair.
Welcome back. Come back here whenever you're tired.
Even though it seems like the Earth King is in charge of Ba Sing Se in Avatar The Last Airbender, it's quickly revealed that the true power behind the throne is the Dai Li, the corrupt secret police who ruthlessly control the city and much of the Earth Kingdom. One of the things Avatar did really well for its time was moral complexity. For half of the entire series, we're told Ba Sing Se is this bastion of freedom and resistance facing down against the myriad evils of the Fire Nation, only to reveal the Dai Li as arguably even more intimidating antagonists than the Fire Nation ever were. Not to mention episodes like Zuko alone, where we see the supposed corruption and cruelty within the supposed good guys Earth Kingdom. It's more than just good versus evil, but the different shapes evil can take and how certain kinds of it are much harder to fight. In fact, they beat Fire Lord Ozai in the end, but never actually managed to defeat the Dai Li. This kind of corruption, it seems, is too deeply rooted, and the story uses organs to explore how authoritarianism comes to be, how corruption works, and how tyrannical systems perpetuate themselves. These are the 3 questions we're going to be looking at today. This video is sponsored by me, and I'm lucky enough to do that because of you. I love making in-depth educational materials which are freely available
Hear
to
me,
everyone
Coloturongo.
on writing books.
Smite these
And
vile
if my work has
intruders.
helped you in any way, if you've learned stuff with me, I'd love you to join Patreon, Discord, or pick up my on writing and world building series, which takes all those discussions to these books. Follow the QR code on screen or the link down in the description below. People often think of authoritarianism as limited to dictatorships, but that's not true. I mean, we have to say it. History is complicated. Authoritarianism is a style of politics or governance which certain models of government are more or less compatible with. All governments are somewhere on this spectrum. Governance which is oppressive and has a disdain and disregard for human rights. Now, the Daily's corruption is especially surprising considering it was founded by none other than Avatar Kyoshi himself, the Avatar who is meant to be this paragon of good in the world. And we have to understand the Earth Kingdom's political environment that led to all this. Corruption and authoritarianism never arises in a vacuum. The Earth Kingdom may look like a single united country in all the pretty maps like Fire Nation, but in reality it's more like 55 semi-independent states who regularly fight amongst themselves. Rebellions, border skirmishes, people throwing a hissy fit. If there's one thing Earth Kingdom history is rife with, it's not unity, it's chaos. The Yellow Name Rebellion, Chin the Conqueror, the Dao Fei, they all threaten to tear the Earth Kingdom apart at various points. Not to mention the royal court itself in Ba Sing Se is regularly full of backstabbing aristocrats who are all trying to get closer to the throne, Game of Thrones style, culminating in things like the Wars of Secrets and Daggers right before Kyoshi became the Avatar. To call it a stable and unified kingdom is to stretch the definition of the words. And the problem is, unstable political environments like this are fertile ground for authoritarianism and corruption. Authoritarianism presenting itself as a solution and corruption as a natural fault in a broken system. And this was ultimately the Daily's downfall. After Avatar Kyoshi passed, not only would the Earth Kingdom become more unstable, with factions looking to fill the power vacuum she left behind, but the Daily themselves would look especially more vulnerable without their leader, their founder, an easy target for other factions in the imperial courts. Despite being founded as an organization to supposedly preserve and protect the Earth Kingdom's cultural heritage, the constant competition and need to protect their own influence inside the court slowly corrupted them, meaning they spend less effort on actually preserving Earth Kingdom culture and more in becoming a deadly secret police institution. See, the problem is authoritarianism is fundamentally inefficient, not just because they tend to over-centralize authority and struggle to respond to their people's wishes, but because the people in power have to pour more resources into taking power and keeping it instead of actually trying to govern. And we see this all the time with authoritarian systems in our world. Resources poured into bribery, over-militarization, repression of opposition, and all of this gives birth to low-trust systems, where institutions and factions within the government are working against each other and even themselves, making it difficult for the government to carry out complex initiatives, and also for populations inside these states to trust the economy and institutions of society, worsening pre-existing problems. Institutions in these societies have fundamentally warped incentives because you cannot govern if you're afraid of a knife in your back. And this manifested in the story of the Dai Li in what became known as the Night of the Silenced Sages. See, one of the other powerful factions within the Earth Kingdom at the time were the Earth Sages. Have you heard of them? No, you wouldn't have, because they're dead. Similar to the Fire Sages we meet in the series, they're these semi-spiritual, sort of bureaucratic officials who helped run the government at the time. It was actually an Earth Sage called Jianzhu who basically ran the Earth Kingdom for decades before Kyoshi came to power, ruthlessly suppressing rebellions, controlling a massive spy network, having a huge influence over the Earth King, and an iron grip on legislation within the Earth Kingdom. In fact, we know the Earth Sages were really concerned with who was going to be able to raise the Avatar when they came around, because the Avatar was going to be a powerful ally. It was all political maneuvering, but in that, they became a dangerous rival to the Dai Li, having this immense influence over the royal family. The Earth King at the time, seeing their rising influence, ordered the sages to be rounded up by the Dai Li and given a choice: bend the knee or die. Only a few survived the ordeal, and those who did were heavily monitored, stripped of influence and isolated from each other. It's the good old authoritarian tactic we've just seen in Turkey. Arrest your immediate opposition just before they can do anything to your grip on power. But, and stay with me here, we're going to put a little bit of a tinfoil hat on. If we read between the lines, the Dai Li didn't just purge the Earth Sages out of, mindless loyalty to the crown. They did it because it eliminated one of their rivals and solidified their own power. One fewer political rivals to contend with in the circles of power, not to mention, where the Earth Sages were spread out and numerous, the Earth King was one guy and perhaps easier to control. So, with the Earth Sages gone, the Dai Li could also fill those important roles in government ministries the Earth Sages once occupied. Suddenly, this created a power dynamic where the crown was even more reliant on the Dai Li for their authority, setting the stage for them to chip away at their final rival, the monarch themselves. And look what happens by the time Aang rolls around in The Last Airbender. They've neutralized the Earth King entirely and taken his power for themselves. See, a hallmark of authoritarianism is the death of political pluralism. Pluralism is where multiple factions with different interests and priorities can still work healthily within the same government. I should say that political pluralism isn't limited to democracies, to parties working together. Monarchies still have to account for things like the church, for the gentry, the merchant class, for the aristocrats. Monarchs were very rarely, if ever, absolute rulers. But authoritarianism tries to chip away at that, to forcefully remove opposition, delegitimize them, otherwise neutralize them, paint their participation in the circles of politics as unnecessary, ineffectual, even traitorous. These patterns play out all the time in our world, and this is exactly what we see in the Earth Kingdom. The Dai Li remove opposition and concentrate power in their own hands. Part of this can be the death of the separation of powers or of the influence of the Constitution. Now, it's not mentioned in the series, but the Earth Kingdom actually did have a constitution. It was a constitutional monarchy, and the Dai Li worked with the Earth King to undermine it, to concentrate further power in the hands of the crown, of the executive. Power which they knew and planned would eventually flow to them. A fundamental tenet in the growth of authoritarianism is continuously modifying the rules of the game to benefit the people in power, make it harder to remove them, make it more difficult for other factions to gain a foothold, and importantly, to legitimize more authoritarian governance. That's why these people tend to attack things like the Constitution. This is also, they can point to the broad powers of the Constitution or this legislation, and they can go, I have the powers to do this and you can't stop me, the courts can't stop me, or at least they muddy the waters so much that everything gets caught up in legal argument and debate for so long that no one can even stop them doing anything. It's too late. It becomes this, oh, who really knows if they were allowed to do that, to the point that them doing it again just becomes normalized. And although the Earth Kingdom doesn't have a separation of powers in the modern sense, we do see the Dai Li blurring the limits and rules of executive power to make it harder to question authority. And this sort of politicking has its basis in history, and the present, sadly. The sages and the Dai Li are, in part, inspired by the literati class in Imperial China, these educated elites who wielded huge amounts of power inside the Imperial Chinese bureaucracy, sometimes even more so than the emperor themselves, and these factions of whom would sometimes purge their opposition as they vied for power. And the world today is facing a wave of democratic backsliding, as authoritarian movements in modern democracies gain momentum primarily by undermining political pluralism and opposition, by casting doubt on the electoral process, weakening checks and balances, widening executive power, weakening the judiciary, and utilizing geopolitical chaos to concentrate power in their hands, with the argument that they are the saviors of their nation, fighting against some kind of evil without and within. Authoritarians, especially ones who are working inside modern democracies, will often try to maintain the sense of legitimacy. They might tear the system and the rules apart to concentrate power, but maintain the sense that they are the true representative of the people, that that's where their power comes from. Attacks on nebulous groups like the media, as if they represent some sort of cohesive ideology, are attempts to delegitimize criticism and paint themselves as the sole arbiters of truth. You don't need to listen to the argument if you can just ignore the source. And with this, a distinct part of that transition towards authoritarianism is the normalization of corruption. This is where first, institutions are slowly broken down so that corruption rarely gets prosecuted or it's prosecuted unequally, especially to further blur the lines of legitimate executive power, and secondly, corruption becomes essential to how the system works. It becomes a fundamental part of the exchange and flow of power and goods. Everyone is corrupt, and everyone needs to be corrupt. It becomes this built-in, often invisible cost. At best, corruption accusations become a tool to wield against political opponents. In fact, during the Night of the Silent Sages, the Earth Sages were almost definitely accused of corruption, of being traitors, of undermining the Earth Kingdom. Interestingly, corruption normalization is actually really well documented in modern-day China. where low wages for public officials on a local level means bribery has become a bit of a standard practice in local government, with some estimates saying it might account for up to 3% of GDP. That's 718 billion Canadian dollars or 10 trillion Mexican pesos. And writer Kyoshi actually describes this sort of thing as becoming a pretty common part of Earth Kingdom bureaucracy. Out there is an entire nation crammed full of corrupt, incompetent people who will try to use the Avatar for their own purposes. Buffoons who call themselves sages, when all it takes in the Earth Kingdom is having the right connections and paying enough gold to plaster such a title on your brow. As the Daily took over the Earth Kingdom bureaucracy, that corruption continued under them, just to serve them. Again, corruption weakens institutions because people working there have a greater incentive to enrich themselves rather than do their job. Especially if they need the money, it distracts them from
Why
doing
do you
their
need
job.
your
It's
legs
because
to
of all
dilute?
this that corruption and authoritarianism are deeply intertwined, reinforcing each other. Authoritarianism sustains itself through corruption, and corruption prevents more democratic and efficient modes of governance from getting a foothold. Both corruption and authoritarianism manifest in what are called patronage networks, where government resources are distributed in part to ensure loyalty and consolidate power, rather than because of where they really need to be. A lot of this will often go to the military or lower level officials, and we actually know the Earth King the Daily did this. After a series of tsunamis hit the southern coast of the Earth Kingdom, the Earth King of the time offered aid, but only conditional on them traveling to work on the outer wall of Ba Sing Se, basically dragging in workforce and power and influence, which in turn increased Ba Sing Se's federal influence over the other states. And when you see Long Feng and the Dai Li this way, the Avatar didn't just represent a threat to his power, but he was someone outside the Dai Li's patronage network with still significant influence. Someone unwilling to be brought into the corruption rank will sometimes be singled out or held back on authoritarian systems because they might represent a threat. To be clear, this isn't always true. Authoritarianism and corruption are both really complicated topics. Like, Singapore is somewhat authoritarian, but it actually has one of the lowest corruption rates in the world, and there are complicated reasons for that. And in speaking about Belarus, an authoritarian state, researcher Marina Zeleznaya spoke about a really interesting quirk of corruption there. While political loyalty is an important mediator of the effect authoritarianism has on corruption, the government deprived politically disloyal organizations of corruption opportunities instead of using corruption as an incentive to promote political loyalty. So it's not always about rewarding loyalty. One really interesting tidbit of Avatar's world building here is that you can see a cycle at play throughout its world history, that authoritarianism rises when the Avatar isn't around. In fact, this is pretty explicit in The Avatar and the Fire Lord, where Sozin refuses to save Roku because, quote, "without you, all my plans are suddenly possible." I don't think it's a coincidence that the Night of the Silent Sages happened in the power vacuum following Avatar Kyoshi's death, and how the Dai Li truly take power from the Earth King and solidify their control only when Roku is gone and Aang isn't around. The Dai Li's concentration of power was made easier when the Earth King also died suspiciously, read between the lines, and the new Earth King was, oh look at that, luckily only 4 years old, nice and ripe to be molded from a young age by Long Feng himself. Although I had a funny thought when researching this video where you can look at the Avatar as kind of like the ultimate authoritarian who just turns up and says, this is how things are gonna be, especially Kyoshi. But, of course, everything changed.
When the Fire Nation attacked.
The 100-Year War presented the Dai Li with an opportunity to cultivate even greater power. Fear of war and starvation, a victim narrative to exploit, the chaos of the influx of refugees, the weakening of the outer states like Omashu, general instability justified even greater purges, even more Orwellian laws under the guise of national security and solidarity, protecting civilization, saving the country. Authoritarianism usually relies on some kind of emotional appeal as being the necessary evil to tackle bigger problems, war, instability, civil unrest, and it'll go back to normal when, of course, things are fine, but things are never fine, apparently. If this sounds familiar, it's because it is not new. It's happening today, and it's happened all throughout history. During World War II, the UK suppressed news of the war through the Ministry of Information. You might not know this, but George Orwell actually made propaganda for the British government, and that work partly inspired 1984. News or failures from the front were often suppressed or spun to be better, the argument being that censorship prevented any publications which might endanger the troops or expose a country's weaknesses, but it was clearly also used to suppress criticism of the government and help politicians hold on to power. The Axis powers were even more brutal with this, more censorious, so much so that the German people kind of barely understood just how poorly the war was going for them a lot of the time. A country divided during wartime can easily get caught up in infighting instead of winning the war. It can lead to a loss of morale and support, and it's just chaos. Something that Dai Li would have necessarily
Time to head back and make a report.
been worried about, leading to their "there is no war in Ba Sing Se" policy. But this kind of unstable wartime political environment and these laws are easily exploited for corrupt purposes. Those in power able to further imprison opposition, concentrate power under the guise of them threatening national security, that emotional appeal being channeled into painting someone else as the enemy, both without and within. And the Dai Li did exactly that. People who might undermine the peace and stability, the haven that is Ba Sing Se. Even the highest ranking generals knew not to criticize them. This was how empires fell. And actually, if you want to learn more about how empires rise and work fall, then volume 1 of my On Writing and World Building series has 3 whole chapters on them with way more depth than I can ever fit on YouTube. Or if you want to learn about how revolutions really work, then On Writing World Building Volume 3, which is even bigger and more in-depth and way better, and it's my favorite volume. Or if you want to learn about writing elemental magic systems or creating civilizations, not to mention a ton of other topics, all unique to each of these books. But all of this goes to show another fundamental tenet of authoritarianism: control of information. Manipulating information available to the public about world affairs, the economy, the state of their own country, allows authoritarianisms to keep a hold of power and suppress rebellious sentiment, even disseminating favorable narratives to create the illusion of legitimacy. And if they can't dismantle the free press, then they might instead try to delegitimize them, label them as liars, and paint themselves as the only source of truth. In fact, Long Feng we know as the Grand Secretariat, based on a real position in the Imperial Chinese government, powerful primarily because they controlled which information went to the emperor himself, often manipulating it for their own benefit or simply suppressing news they didn't want to pass on. The Earth Sages definitely controlled where information went and who to, and when that bureaucracy passed to the Dai Li, that power did as well, only entrenched during the 100-Year War. Again, authoritarians will rarely paint themselves as authoritarian by nature, but instead the savior of the people, right? That's the narrative they'll want to sell and control. They'll often use their control of information streams to further the destruction of.
What brings you here to Rada Hall? How are you faring with the investigation? Was there something you have a report to make, yes?
Oh, it's escalating,
We are
alright.
grateful for your hard work. I see. I hope this is of use in your investigation. Hello.
Pluralism, painting their opposition as traitors or servants of that hidden or outside evil
Well
which
done.
only their
I bid you good
authoritarianism
luck.
can confront. You can only trust them, and authoritarianism is the price
Welcome
we
to the
pay.
Rooster
And of
Inn.
course, how can we talk about their control of information and people and the whole system that built up without talking about Lake Laogai? We learned dissidents were imprisoned or even brainwashed. Lake Laogai was actually based on a real network of prison camps in Maoist China, the Laogai system, meaning reform through labor. There was also the Laozhao system, which meant re-education through labor. They were slightly different, but it's also worth noting here the Dai Li were partly named after the leader of the Blue Shirt Society, a fascist organization under Chiang Kai-shek who regularly assassinated and imprisoned his opponents. They were inspired by multiple things, all of which were authoritarian. The most important thing here being an over-reliance on punishment. Authoritarian movements generally advocate for harsher punishments over rehabilitation, even the death sentence. To them, fear is an important tool just as much as punishment is. It justifies more extreme powers, it undermines checks and balances and constitutional protections. They use arguments like, oh, you're against these terrible methods? Oh, you must be pro the rebels or murderers or whatever. This too is a hallmark of democratic backsliding today, often coupled with a narrative that the country is at risk and only harsher punishments and fewer restrictions on law enforcement can root out the enemy within. We don't see the Daily pushing this narrative specifically, but interestingly we do see it with Kuvira later on, who of course also paints other people as enemies of that hidden and outside evil which only authoritarianism
Sign in over here, please.
front. But with
back
this,
here
their
whenever
claim
you're
to
tired.
power was complete. They were the de facto rulers of the Earth Kingdom. But this drags us to another question. When authoritarianism manages to remove all opposition, if they accomplish their goals, what then? Indoctrination, to guard against opposition in the future. This is another part of them controlling information, controlling the narrative about themselves, their history, the threats the country faces. While the Daily were originally volunteers who wanted to serve the Earth Kingdom, Longfeng started them taking children off the street and training them up from a young age, trapping them in a social system where they had a place, power, influence, in which they were trained to serve in obedience, not only entrenching their power, but trying to guard against infighting in the future. After all, without an enemy they can unite against, authoritarianisms will often resort to infighting. All of this is why one of the best moments in the series is when Longfeng tells the Daily to arrest Azula, and they don't. They join her, backstabbing him.
Daily, arrest the Fire Nation princess.
It's because they haven't made up their minds, she said. They're waiting to see how this is going to end. The fact is, they don't know which one of us is going to be sitting on that throne, which one of us is going to be bowing down. Because ultimately, a lot of authoritarian systems, not all, but a lot of them are inherently fragile. The normalization of corruption creates easy breakpoints, and it's a system with backstabbing built into it. Authoritarians often have to resort to necessarily pitting their lessers against each other, which really doesn't help. Just as much as authoritarianism is inherently inefficient, it can also be inherently self-destructive, eating away at itself. This is not to say that they cannot last for a long time, but that while democracy can seem inefficient and slow, its greatest strength is that it has a built-in mechanism to accommodate radical change. You can vote people out. There's an easy way for the people inside and outside the political structure to implement changes without breaking the system as a whole. How power is transferred, which is when systems are most vulnerable, is clear and easy. There are
We're the Sandy Barons? Hell yeah. This is my favorite area in the game. So it really was, this floor really was just a boss floor. It's weird. I'm gonna listen to the arrange, but I might be playing through the entirety of Sandy Barons and the original OST. Because my god, that song kicks so much ass.
Welcome to the Rooster Inn. Sign in over here, please. Congratulations. Come back here whenever you're tired.
Hello? What you got for me? Is that all you came for? Next time you should buy something. Welcome back, everyone. I am at your service. Here you are. Is there anything else? Very well, I'll get them ready. serve you. Have a safe trip. Hey there.
I think the entirety of yyyy might be addicted to tea.
Hey there. You want to ask around? Hey, listen to this.
Staves is indeed the correct plural for staff. It makes no sense either, but that's just English for you apparently.
You want to ask around? Hey, listen to this.
I still can't paralyze.
You want to ask around? You want to ask around? I'm so... You want to ask around?
Oh, come on!
Is the leggy dark hunter and the angry looking alchemist from the same guild?
What'll it be?
It's actually hilarious, I think, if that is the case.
You want to ask around?
Can I help you?
I'm counting on you.
Ah, it's you. You sign up a good crew? If you didn't give it some thought, you'll regret it later. Keep it quick.
Hmm.
We'll see you around.
What brings you here to Rada? Be careful on your way. Was there something else? You are free to leave.
Welcome to the Rooster Inn.
Actually,
Sign
I've
in
already
over here,
listened to
please.
the
Come back here
to this
whenever you're
version,
tired.
right, from Nexus. Eh. Fuck. Oh, the music's finally different. No.
This is why authoritarianism often starts by attacking or muddying the electoral process. You have to instill a lack of faith in the system before you can entirely break it. Authoritarianism doesn't offer that easy transfer of power. It's built to resist change and is often centered around a few people like Long Feng, without whom it just breaks. And that self-destructive tendency can be transferred to whoever is in power next. You see that with Azula, funnily enough, banishes the Dai Li because they've already betrayed Long Feng. Why wouldn't they betray her? Like, I get it, she was kind of losing her marbles there, but she was kind of right. Corruption perpetuates but also encourages the disintegration of the next regime, and ultimately, that's why Aang couldn't put an end to the Dai Li the way he did Fire Lord Ozai, because it's a system, not a person. The real world is complicated, it is difficult, it requires tireless, conscious effort from everyone to ensure it is heading in the right direction. And with the way the world is currently heading, we need more of that than ever. We need to understand how authoritarianism works before we can stop it. I love Avatar. I've loved it for a long time. I don't only talk about it, but I do like talking about it. I love its magic system, I love its world, and storytelling is a passion of mine, as it may well be yours. And I'm really happy that I get to make freely accessible, open, in-depth educational stuff online, you know, that everyone has access to kind of learn. I think that's important. That's how I started my channel. I hope you think it's important too. Sometimes I do this in videos like my writing and world building series. Sometimes it's videos like this, where I use like Avatar or different stories to kind of explore interesting topics. But I'm only able to do that because of my supporters on Patreon, because of the people who get my books. I mean, they are just a huge amount of my job now. It's really quite incredible, and I want to say thank you to everyone who has. And that's about a whole other video you can watch right now over on Patreon. We talk about how food is building soup, and I talk about Avatar in that one too. It's actually one of my favorite videos I've made in a long time. Or if you want to learn more, then my On Writing a World Building series takes all of the discussions we've had about fiction, storytelling, and puts them these easy to reference books, which all work together, and they have way more depth and analysis and detail than I could ever justify putting on YouTube. You know, I have to be conscious of the algorithm and stuff like that. I don't have to with these. These are better, and I'm so proud of them, and 100,000 other people have already got on them. I think you should too. By the way, all 3 volumes are entirely separate, cover different topics, so you can get the ones which cover the topics you're interested in, although I recommend getting them all. Thank you so much. I only get to make videos where I don't take sponsors like this because of you, because the people who get these books who support me on Patreon, it really does mean the world. And I'm so happy that I get to create stuff like this. They're the gaming industry's greatest villain, a company synonymous with evil and malpractice. They buy out studios and kill them when the profits run out. They manipulate players into spending money using the dirtiest tricks in the book. They were voted the worst company in America 2 years in a row. But as other studios are shutting down in record numbers, Electronic Arts has managed to somehow push their profits higher and higher year after year. Which begs the question, how is a company so widely reviled by everyone still worth more than $40 billion? Like all great questions, it starts at the humblest of beginnings, long before EA became the evil empire we know today. It might surprise you to hear this, but when EA started out, they were one of the good guys. They were about creativity, respect. When Trip Hawkins started the company in 1982, he wanted video game developers to be revered as artists, on par with film directors and rock stars. A nod to their futuristic vision, EA's early ads featured the slogan, "We see farther." After a few fairly successful games with Skate or Die and Pinball Construction Set, Trip turned his attention to a genre that defines EA to this day, sports games. A fan of American football, Trip was obsessed with the idea of creating a realistic football simulation, something that wasn't on the market at the time. So, EA got Super Bowl winner and Hall of Famer John Madden to help out with the development process, creating the first Madden game in 1988. This Hail Mary would instantly turn into a touchdown, changing EA forever. The money started flooding in. Suddenly, corporate executives were approaching EA with promises of turning them into a gaming powerhouse. One of these execs was Larry Probst. Larry was a businessman first and foremost, who only cared about one thing, money. His approach to this new gaming thing involved buying small studios and absorbing them into the EA brand. These studios would make the games, EA would collect the profits. But getting this strategy off the ground would require a lot of money. So, EA went public on the stock exchange in 1989 with a valuation of 84 million USD, more than enough money to put Larry's business model into practice. But going public would be EA's first major turning point. When a company goes public, suddenly they have an obligation to their shareholders and start to care less and less about their players. Business guys like Larry Probst love this because it means making more money. But for gaming purists who believe in video games as an art form, it's almost painful to see. Unsurprisingly, in 1991, Trip Hawkins left, and with him went the heart of the company. In his place, Larry Probst assumed the position of CEO and promoted another corporate executive, John Riccitello, to be his right-hand man. Over the next 16 years, these two would mold EA from the innovative studio that treated developers as rock stars to an evil empire slowly taking over the world. Fast forward to 2007. Larry had been in charge of the company for the last 18 years and was incredibly successful, bringing EA's value up to $16 billion. But he was getting older, and it was time to step back. So, he became company chairman and gave up his CEO position to John Riccitello. Riccitello was just as ruthless as his previous master, and continued EA's tradition of gobbling up smaller game studios. This was a practice that had been hugely rewarding over the years. For example, EA bought Maxis, the creator of The Sims, back in 1997 for $125 million. 10 years later, The Sims franchise was selling 22 million copies in a year, making them one of EA's most valuable franchises and generating $1 billion in revenue. But for every successful acquisition, there were hundreds of studios that were destroyed by EA. EA's top priority was output and sales. Studios were purchased, presented with deadlines, forced to rush to meet these deadlines, and then if for some reason that game underperformed, the studio would be shut down altogether. Origin Systems, Bullfrog Productions, Westwood Studios, Pandemic Studios, Mythic Entertainment, Visceral Games, all victims of EA's business strategy. By the late 2000s, the graveyard of dismantled game studios had grown to the hundreds, earning EA the nickname of the Evil Empire. Gamers watched in despair as their favorite series were disfigured beyond recognition or outright cancelled under EA's watch. The company was quickly becoming a magnet for bad press, and their shareholders were not happy about the company literally being called evil. By April 2010, the company's value had dropped over $9 billion to $5.5 billion. Games were launching with content locked behind paywalls, and this new thing called microtransactions were starting to pop up more and more. In short, no one was happy with EA. It came to a head when EA won the Worst Company in America award from Consumerist not once, but twice in 2012 and 2013. EA beat out all the banks, oil companies, airlines, and other horrible companies in the world to win the title 2 years in a row. When asked about this public drubbing, EA's leadership tried to play it humble, saying, quote, "We take it seriously and want to see it change." EA's leadership noted that the company had started adjusting some unpopular policies. For instance, eliminating the dreaded online pass systems that forced used game buyers to pay extra fees and ensuring single-player games like The Sims 4 could be played offline. EA executive Frank Chabot said, quote, "The point is, we are listening, and we are changing." But that was all fanfare, because in reality, EA wasn't listening. All they cared about was making more money, and everything else was secondary. One early flashpoint was Dead Space 3 in 2013, a $60 AAA title where they completely broke the immersive survival horror experience by having menus pop up, asking players to buy crafting materials. But this was just the start. EA's mobile division took the franchise Dungeon Keeper and reimagined it as a free-to-play mobile game, which they then jam-packed full of so many microtransactions that the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK ruled that they were falsely advertising by calling the game free in the first place. With stories like these constantly in the news cycle, EA's stock prices started to plummet, and the blame fell squarely on John Riccitiello. With pressure from shareholders clamping down, Riccitiello stepped down as CEO in 2013. Taking his place was a young protege named Andrew Wilson, who promised a new era of financial stability by taking EA's evil practices to the next level. Wilson got his start at EA in 2000. A basketball and rugby player from Australia, Wilson's hands-on athletics experience made him a natural fit at EA Sports. In the early days, Wilson was known as a player-first kind of guy, excelling at creating games that were fun, realistic, and engaging, and he eventually worked his way up to the executive producer of FIFA, helping the franchise win 2 BAFTA awards in 2010. But during his climb to the top of the EA ladder, Wilson was personally mentored by Larry Probst, who inspired Wilson to become more like him, more like a businessman. So when Riccitiello stepped down and Wilson was named CEO in 2013, he set to work trying to make EA profitable. What he did was popularize not one, but 2 of the most manipulative practices in the game industry. Practices that we still haven't recovered from to this day. The first was everyone's favorite slot machine, the loot box. It started in FIFA as a simple idea, and a harmless one at that. Let players build a fantasy team of their favorite players and take them online against other fantasy teams. But rather than give people access to every player in the game, they'd have to earn players by trading with others or by opening packs. These packs were totally random and very addictive. This concept quickly evolved into the monstrosity that is FIFA Ultimate Team. Since having better players makes it easier to win games, players would open pack after pack after pack, hoping to unlock that one player that would help their team win. FIFA would also offer limited edition player cards that had boosted stats and looked really cool, and preyed on people's desires to get that shiny new thing. For many, pack opening became so addictive that they didn't even play the game. Like zombies at a slot machine, players would spend hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars just opening packs for the rush of getting a good card. The lights, the spectacle, the excitement, opening packs, or any other loot boxes is a form of gambling. And we shouldn't have to tell you, but it's pretty evil. What makes it worse is that they're in a game marketed towards children. Stories quickly emerged of teenagers spending thousands of dollars of their parents' money opening FIFA packs. Gaming forums filled with tales of pack addiction, and the mechanic was quickly likened to a
Gleam
roulette
is
table
instant
turned
death.
into a soccer game. The controversy grew so intense that in 2018,
Run!
authorities in Belgium and the
Ah!
Netherlands investigated big publishers for potential gambling law violations. These investigations were spurred in part by FIFA's loot box system. Belgium concluded that loot boxes were unregulated gambling and banned them outright. But EA wasn't about to let their cash cow get away from them so easily. In 2019, EA sent representatives to a UK parliamentary hearing. There, an EA executive gave a now legendary defense of loot boxes, claiming that EA prefers to call them surprise mechanics, and compared them to Kinder Surprise eggs that kids have enjoyed for years. The phrase surprise mechanics instantly became a meme. Media outlets and gamers skewered the comparison as tone-deaf, but regardless of what people were saying, EA were going to defend their loot boxes because they were just too profitable to give up without a fight.
Let's look at some numbers that back that up. In 2012, EA was valued at $4 billion. By 2017, they were valued at more than $32 billion. Ultimate Team modes in FIFA, NHL, and Madden made up around 30% of EA's revenue
Nice,
during this
you.
period,
See you
making
around.
a staggering $3 billion between 2015 and 2017,
Let me have a
and
look.
proving
Welcome back,
that
everyone. I
microtransactions
am at
were
your
the way
service.
of the future.
Here
The
you
reason
are.
these Ultimate Teams were so
Is there
effective
anything
was
else?
EA Sports' annual release
carry
cycle.
this one.
Let's consider Madden
Who
for
will
a
carry
second.
this one?
This is a franchise that has released a new installment every single year since 1990, with new features, game modes, and roster updates. In the 90s and 2000s, each new game looked way better than the last, so people were okay paying $40, $50, $60 if it meant the game was going to be way better than last year's iteration. But in 2004, EA signed an exclusive license with the NFL, making it so no one else could use NFL teams or players. EA effectively had a monopoly on the genre, and therefore had no incentive to continue innovating. Year after year, they put out the same game with minor changes, and sometimes put themselves in a position where the new game was actually worse than the previous iteration. By the late 2010s, full of buggy gameplay and neglected game modes, the phrase Madden stagnation had become a common refrain. In 2020, this long-simmering frustration reached a boiling point with Madden NFL 21, which would become one of the lowest-rated sports games in
Next time you
history.
should buy
Users
something.
gave it a 0.4 out of 10 on Metacritic,
Welcome to
and
the
social
Rooster
media
Inn.
exploded with the hashtag
I'll call. Is there
NFLDropEA.
anything else I can
But
help you with?
the
Very
public
well. Then
outcry
allow
did
me to show
not
you
bother
to your
EA
room.
one bit. Despite what the fans were saying, Madden was still making money. EA's